Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain and welcome to The Top. We've talked about the best movies, we've talked about the best actors, but one of the most salient aspects of a great DCOM is oftentimes the hard work put in by the men and women behind the camera. The best directors can use their own unique vision to turn words on a page into inspired dialogue and screenplay as the leaders of their production. And that vision can sometimes make all the difference between a great film and a bad one. But which directors did it the best? Well, let's break it down as we kick things off with number 10. We've talked about Stuart Gillard quite a bit on this channel, mainly because his abilities produce a very wide range of results. But what he does have, as discussed in the intro, is a very unique vision for filming DCOMs. For better, and sometimes for worse, he knows how to effectively capture the grander visuals surrounding his stories, especially when it comes to Arthurian lore, but also when it comes to fighting back monsters. He can be inconsistent at times with filming the ideas he's working with, but even with an idea as ridiculous as Hatching Pete, he still found a way to cultivate a solid story with it that embraced how silly the premise was and didn't try to make it more serious than it had to be. Twitches naturally knocks him down a bit, otherwise he'd be much higher, but he still has undeniably shaped Disney Channel with his directorial prowess, and whether you love his movies or not, he knows how to film them. Directing animated TV shows and movies is an entirely different ballgame than directing the more typical live-action film, but it's still a tough job and one that Steve Lauder knows how to do very well. He was the director for both Kim Possible movies in addition to the show itself, a smart decision that allowed the movies to be sensibly tied to the show, even with all that time travel in the first one. That also kind of works against the movies to a degree because both of them feel more like two-part episodes than actual films, but both are still high in quality. Steve's been a big part in the direction, production, and animation of several other shows, but his work with Kim Possible is definitely his best. He knows how to effectively direct the great action scenes the show is known for, but part of what makes him a great DCOM director is how the action choreography in the movies is even better, but he also knows how to set the scene for the more casual moments as well, so he can view great characters like Ron, Shigo, Draken, and of course Kim herself as more than just good and evil pairs, but as fully realized individuals. Not many Disney Channel shows get movies, but Steve Lauder nailed these two. The vision of Steve Boyum helped bring life to extreme sports movies such as Motocross and Johnny Tsunami. A lot of what places him here is his knack for directing that stunt work, which really comes naturally to him since he's been in the Hollywood stunt business since the 1970s. The way he captures those sports, especially in Motocross, really brings the sport itself to life. But one of his more underappreciated abilities is how he works with the more emotionally laden moments in the same movies. That's a bit more surface level in Stepsister from Planet Weird, which he also filmed, but that also made Johnny Tsunami one of the greatest DCOMs of all time. The dynamic present between father and son, son and grandfather, grandfather and father, it all works to create a powerful film about family. That same family focus works in his other films as well, but is a little less consistent in its overall effectiveness. But all in all, Steve Boyum is at his best when capturing both the sporting extremes and the emotional extremes that end up providing the backbone behind a lot of his directorial work. Two very divergent film concepts that are hard to balance, but Boyum finds a way. Unlike the directors just behind her, Patricia Riggen has only directed one DCOM in her life, but that DCOM just so happens to be one of the all-time best. The captivating way she frames scene after scene after scene, the meaningful ways she develops characters across the board, and the way she progresses not just the narrative, but the music that goes with it from point to point is just brilliant. It won't surprise you that given her skills, she's gone on to directing feature films now, most notably The 33. But as far as her singular DCOM goes, every frame, every scene, every character is its own miniature accomplishment, sensibly tied together towards one of the grandest DCOM experiences ever captured. But the two scenes that stand out the most are the getting out of jail scene that beautifully completes the arcs of several of the characters present, and the band breakdown scene near the very end, which is just a great example of emotional timing and patience. Patricia gets a ton of help here from some great acting courtesy of the leads, but did she ever put together a great finished product? It only makes sense to follow up an exceptional one-time DCOM director with another. Both of them would have been higher based on their abilities, but one thing that's also a big factor here is how many movies they've actually worked on for the network. That having been said, Kevin Hooks makes this list for directing the greatest DCOM of all time. If you haven't seen The Color of Friendship Watch The Color of Friendship and experience the outstanding ways that Hooks captures not just the incredible dynamic present by the leading ladies, but also how he effectively utilizes the much larger geopolitical context to deliver the simple yet powerful message that learning and understanding is the key to overcoming preconceptions and bigotry. It's not always easy, and the process is far from perfect, but it's worth it. And he didn't just direct this movie either, he produced it as well, meaning he had a large hand to play in what the final scripts were and how the final product was edited. Giving him that much control turned out to be a great decision because nothing about this movie felt out of place. Barely a wasted word of dialogue, a length that effectively conveyed its message without much fluff, and a potent screenplay with the single greatest take-home message in any DCOM. Everything about this movie was risky from Disney's perspective, but it paid off because of the man they hired to bring this movie to life. While Jeffrey Hornaday hasn't made movies as good as The Color of Friendship or Lemonade Mouth, he does have several DCOMs to his name, and while his finished products do have noteworthy flaws, Hornaday has unbelievable skill with uniquely constructing narratives using otherwise familiar plots, characters, setups, then subverting them. Geek Charming is by far his best movie because Hornaday smartly chooses to give the oftentimes obnoxious popular girl focus instead of just creating a generic antagonist for the real lead to deal with. Both the movie itself and the movie Matt Prokop's character is filming are both about understanding Sarah Hyland's character in Dylan, and all the while paying close attention to the details surrounding what being a movie within a movie means. And even with the Teen Beach movies, as polarizing as they can sometimes be, he directs them exactly as they needed to be directed. The original was mostly a parody of the musical movie format that had become fairly commonplace on Disney Channel, and the second one realizes that and subverts that unique structure to give a narrative that advances and empowers most of the characters present. Namely Layla, who Teen Beach 2 revolves around and eventually changes for. There's many things about both Beach movies that are either broken or just don't fit cleanly into the overall film, but their great directing is undoubtedly there. He's also slated to be the director of High School Musical 4, and the main reason I have faith in that project, in addition to Kenny coming back for the choreography of course, is because Hornaday is simply one of the smartest DCOM directors there is, because even when the finished product is a little all over the place, when he gets it right, he gets it very right. Even though Lev L. Spiro has only directed 2 DCOMs, his high spot on this list has everything to do with just how well he directed both Minutemen and the Wizards movie. I constantly say that this is the guy that needs more DCOMs to work on, and in just 2 movies, he showcases why. The best parts of the Wizards movie really are on the surface level. At the end of the day, it's the Russos going on a magical adventure, but Lev knows exactly how to make that work by pushing all of the characters to places the show itself never could. He directed 2 all-time great lead performances by both David Henry and Selena Gomez, and wisely placed a heavy focus on their dynamic, as well as getting solid work from the supporting cast, especially Maria Canales-Barrera. Lev knew exactly how to make the entire family follow his vision for a beautifully captured adventure that, at its core, really is carried by the family itself. And then we have Minutemen, a movie almost as good but for different reasons. This is Lev working with an idea and scaling it in a sensible way, given the setting he's working with. It's basically a superhero movie that uses time travel as a creative means to say that sometimes high school sucks, but now we have the power to help make it a little bit better for others. But, of course, you throw in the unintended consequences and the temptations to be selfish, and then you have a complete movie. At the end of the day, Lev knows exactly how to direct narrative concepts and ideas, and do so in a variety of ways while still having one very important thing in common: quality. Surprising a grand total of no one is the inclusion of likely the most famous DCOM director of all time. His filmography can pretty much speak for itself, but the one thing all of those movies have in common is exceptional choreography. Maybe a little less so in Descendants, but that movie wasn't as built for that versus something like the Cheetah Girls 2. He's the best in the business when it comes to bringing a film to life through the power of song and dance. Even when his films have problems in other areas, much of that can be overlooked because of the talent he has for choreography. But with the big flashy style he's known for, his other great directorial traits often get overlooked. High School Musical, for all its grandiosity, was basically a story built around 2 introverts with their crazy friends and peers moving the plot for them. And it was so intelligent to tone down the leads in that way because it allowed the main characters to feel more like real people, especially Troy. But Descendants also has a great undercurrent about it. Remember how a lot of the Ordon kids were pricks and the villain kids seemed less reprehensible by comparison? A brilliant angle that essentially informs us that in a movie called Descendants, actually being a descendant doesn't really matter at all versus the individual you choose to become, in addition to the litany of historical metaphors that could easily serve as inspiration for Prince Ben's unification ideals. The point here is that Kenny Ortega is a great director for more reasons than just his knack for great music. He did help give rise to arguably the best DCOM soundtrack ever made, but he also works some very subtle and interesting details into his two best films so far. And when you understand the complete package that Ortega represents, it's not really a surprise that Disney Channel trusts him with some of their biggest films. A really tough call here between the great Kenny Ortega and the man I believe to be just a hair greater overall. While Duwayne Dunham doesn't have the same knack for high-minded narratives, movie adaptations, or musical performance relative to some of his peers, he does do one thing exceptionally well that in some ways beats out all of those traits. He makes you feel almost everything he films. This is the guy behind Halloweentown, Right on Track, and most notably of all, Tiger Cruise, one of the all-time best. What all three of his best DCOMs have in common are emotional weight. With Halloweentown, the experience is almost unmatched. You feel the wonderment, you feel the joy, you feel the magic with the way he captures it all. With Right on Track, it's structured in such a way that you can figuratively ride along with everything Erica Enders is going through, all the highs and the lows. And with Tiger Cruise, once September 11th comes in the movie, Dunham masterfully puts every emotion on screen while also giving the characters just enough nuance to justify their differing reactions. Heck, even Double Teamed has some good scenes in that department. No DCOM director has done better at the simple but exceptionally difficult to execute idea of giving a film enough heart to resonate with people. We could talk narratives and plot progressions till we're blue in the face, but Duwayne Dunham, at his best, creates more than just films. He creates experiences. Different, yet powerful experiences. And at the end of the day, isn't that what watching movies is really all about? However, one director has him beat for the top spot. Who made it to number one? Well, if you've watched literally any of my videos, the answer should be pretty obvious. But before we get there, let's bring in some honorable mentions. And who else could possibly top the list other than the man, the myth, the legend himself? The plethora of award nominations and wins speak for themselves. So let's go deeper than that. His immunity to creating even a semblance of a terrible film is only matched by the fact that with his myriad of DCOMs, he could literally have his own top 10 list. He's so great at making movies that sometimes, just for fun, he repurposes general concepts from his older works and says, you know what, that was good, but I bet I can do it even better. He is the very definition of a great DCOM, but has also essentially written the book on what it means to take sometimes dubious ideas like disappearing sisters, perfect boyfriends, and sentient figures of imagination and give it real meaning. He's got a seemingly infinite amount of great traits, but his best one is his mastery of metaphors, something that seems overt in design, but is actually a brilliant representation of a much larger or complex idea. Invisible Sister isn't really about a crazy science experiment gone wrong. It's about two sisters coming to understand each other through both literal and figurative invisibility and what it means to represent both. How to Build a Better Boy isn't really about perfection. It's about how humanity's inherent flaws actually have great value and the importance of life balance, because even the best of things, like being smart, aren't the only things. And Dadnapped has a lot more to do with the psychology of a complicated father-daughter relationship than any of the zany plotting you get from Jason Earls. And guys, that's just scratching the surface here, which is incredibly ironic because far too many people only ever see the surface level when watching his oftentimes underrated films. But even at that level, he's achieved complete mastery of every recognizable DCOM trait there is. Great narrative designs, we covered that. Utilizing novel ideas and concepts for great screenplay, that's basically his whole filmography, take your pick. Powerful emotional weight, have you seen this movie? Musical numbers, Let It Shine, One World, and Camp Rock 2, all with solid music, but all of them also have at least one track that is intelligently tied to the grander narrative, and with Let It Shine, there's at least 3 tracks like that. Pure genius. One of the best decisions Disney Channel ever made was when they all got into a room back in 2001 and said, hey, you all remember that guy who directed Luck of the Irish, right? I say, let's keep hiring him. And then, just a year later, in what I can only call an act of pure providence, he films his masterpiece. Having watched every second of his DCOMs, I'm in constant awe of his on-screen expression, wonderstruck by the meticulous ways he works with the bigger picture, but especially with the finer details, and in complete reverence for the unquantifiable impact he's had on the network. Every single time, without fail, he gives me a reason to think more deeply about what I'm watching, making him not just a personal inspiration, but honestly, the largest reason this channel exists at all. I could seriously go on for hours, guys, and in real life, I actually have, but I think you all get the point loud and clear. And if you happen to be watching this, Mr. Hoen, then allow me to say thank you. And hopefully, your next project will be every bit as inspiring as the legacy you've created. The man, the myth, and the legend is #1, so the list is done. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this countdown, you know what? Let's not do the same old rundown this time. I have but one humble request. I would like all of you to tweet Paul Hoen himself and tell him which of his films is your favorite. He actually does look at that stuff, so it just might make his day. And if he's not your favorite director, tweet or message the one that is and make their day. Why not spread a little appreciation? Until then...
Keep a trophy that you don't deserve. I might be a bus boy, but you just got served.